I'm like learning to
Check.
appreciate everything that you do when I just come in and sit here and
Yeah.
talk my ass off versus having to understand any of this. So
That should be working out. So if anybody is still paying attention, thank you for putting up with the technical difficulties there. I think you should be able to hear me now. Ah, okay, great. Thanks everyone. I apologize. So Ashley, let's get back into the second part of Matt's question. In terms of leading the department, what have you tried that fell flat? Did you fail and move on, or did you make adjustments?
um, there's been a couple things. Some of them had to do with project ownership. So I like people to have different pillars of what they're responsible for, what they feel like they want to grow and see a vision for outside of their just regular tasks. So some of this has succeeded, some of it hasn't. So I think what fell flat for me is just assuming that people would want to do this and that they would care and that they'd find, energy in doing it. There are some folks on my team that love this and they're amazing. I'm thinking of one in particular who also wants to be a product owner at someday. So for them, there's like this really cool fit of taking something and developing that idea in a way that it can be used across the company with clients. With other folks, it's like that's not where their ambition lies.
Yeah.
So it's a specific thing. What fell flat is me assuming that all people would be energized the same way I am, right? Or would like the same kind of special projects that I do. That is pretty short sighted. Thank God not everybody is like me. But in terms of doing that, it either takes restructuring the project. If it's important, it needs to be done. So instead of saying, hey, I want you to have this passion project, I want to see where you can take it, part of it is like, I need you to hit this milestone. It may not be as lofty, but we all have to show up and do good things to keep the business going. So that's why I've restructured it. I've also tried to just pair people up. So I have a team of very diverse folks. We've recently taken like the Clifton Strength Finder that Dan, you and I compared our findings to as well.
Yeah.
And that was good to look at because I was able to find people on the team, one that might be, really into ideas and one that might be the activator to get it done and pair them. Because if you're asking people to do work that they don't care that much about, especially on their own, like it's not going to work. But if you can reframe it differently, strip it down, or partner them with someone who does like to make it happen, then you're going to be somewhat successful. There's still shit work nobody wants to do. That's
Yeah.
okay.
Your team's mostly doing audits and working for the enterprise clients that DeepCrawl has, correct?
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of it. I mean, there are some audits and projects, but a lot of it is they just are working with some of our bigger clients and solving tough problems. So
Yeah.
they are acting like an extension of a lot of big companies' teams. So we see a lot of unique problems.
What if milestones doesn't work, right? So personally, I don't respond to milestones at all. When I'm doing an audit, I enjoy it for the sake of like the actual process. I kind of get all my tabs open, right? And I just really enjoy being in the moment of like doing an audit and investigating and finding things out. So that's for me, like milestones would never work on me. In fact, I might go in the opposite direction with a milestone. I might be like, goals? What are you talking about? So what do you do for people
Yeah.
when they don't respond to like that particular incentive or other incentives?
Yeah, there is. So, I mean, you bring up a good point because for you, it's not about lengthy documentation, right? You want to
Right.
find that magic on a call with a client. And that's pretty awesome. And that can be difficult to reproduce. So, when someone has that, I don't want to squash it, right? So, there's got to be room for people to handle things in different ways. I like to think of it in terms of clients. So, I've got one fellow on my team who just likes to handle tough scripting questions and write new processes. He's really great for a huge high tech client that has a use case nobody else has.
Yeah.
um, those types of clients aren't really great for other people who like the milestones and documentation and to like set out 3-month project plans instead of just going with the flow. But at the end of the day, everyone needs to document what they're doing to some degree.
Yeah.
Because clients pay for something and expect value, and so we're working a lot to understand what that value delivery is. Like, great data, great analysis, give me one sentence on why they should give a shit.
Yeah.
Right, that needs to happen. And just, I think, in terms of teaching others, which the team does have a passion for, speak to that. If it's not about client stuff, speak to them about their peers, because a lot of folks do really want to help other people learn.
Yeah.
So even if you're not just, I need milestones, or I need you to mark this down for me, it's how can we make this more scalable? And on the team right now, we're hiring a couple of associate level folks. And the idea really is to just honor what mentoring looks like and how to bring people along with us. And so that's also kind of lent itself to making sure that we're adding a sentence or two about why it matters and what next.
Yeah. And I love the answer. As people are joining and you're in the chat, feel free to share this live stream. One of the things I want to do here with these live Q&As is bring people in the community in. And also, you know, there's Clubhouse, but Clubhouse excludes people right now. So I would love for this and other events of similar things like on YouTube that are more publicly accessible for people, like to be something that everybody can join, no matter if you have an iPhone or not, or an invite or not. So definitely feel free to send some other folks in the SEO community or outside of that into the chat, into the live stream to participate, ask questions, and hang out with us, especially now that all the technology is working. Your last comment there dovetailed into another question that Matt had. Then we're going to get to a bunch of other Twitter questions from people, and then hopefully some people leave questions in the chat as well. This is interactive, so definitely people, you know, if you have follow-up questions to one of our answers or whatnot, feel free to let us know. Also, the first chunk of this Q&A today is going to be on a lot of this sort of team hiring things, but then there's a lot of ranking factor stuff, technical SEO stuff that we're going to get into a little bit later, in case people are wondering when that is coming. So Matt had another question he asked earlier in the week. He said he noticed you have like a nice application process now at DeepCrawl. You know, what inspired that effort to improve it? And, you know, what is that sort of helping to improve in general?
Yeah, applying for jobs sucks. Like, how demoralizing is it when you're looking for a role to then go to sites that suck where you have to type in all your information that's a literal copy of your resume? Also, resumes suck. So we rethought and reworked with a different partner, beapplied.com, beapplied.com, to use a process that eliminated the need for resumes at all. And a lot of that basic info. That is easier on folks, I think, just because we're all kind of sick of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I want to make it easier for someone to apply. If I'm asking someone to put their name out there, I don't want them to be demoralized step one. Right. I wanted to show some energy. But one of the bigger reasons that we changed how we hired and using this platform is just to try and expand. I don't know. I want to hire people that are bringing new perspectives in, is what it comes down to. I feel like diversity has some loaded connotations, but ultimately I wanted to work on a pipeline that was more inclusive. I don't want to know your name. I don't want to know your gender. I don't want to know your race or your education level. What I'd like to have you do as you apply is just tell me a little bit about the problems and questions that we ask so that we can see how you're thinking. So we score, like, is the application masculine or feminine? What types of words are we using that might trigger unconscious bias just on the job posting without us knowing? And then the big thing is once we have a critical mass, we do a blind review as a team. So that I've also got team members that aren't biased toward their friends or their enemies, but are just looking at how folks are answering the questions. And so it's really a gathering group effort, blinded reviews, and taking it from there. And I think there was just a big conscious effort in my company, but also on the team, where we needed to have a more inclusive pipeline, but we also need to be just like, you know, open our eyes and be smarter about how many great people are out there. There are people doing amazing work, but they're not on Twitter, nor should they have to be. Twitter's kind of a cesspool. I love it. It's my second home, but it's trash. And so being able to reach out and not have names so we can find people and evaluate them just based on how they think about technical SEO versus where they've been, what they've done, and who they know.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So we have our first question in the chat from Nikki. She's asking you, Ashley, what are your favorite books and resources that have helped you to be the kick-ass team leader that you are?
Okay, my boss is gonna love this because he's sending me books now. Wow, I don't want to say that I prescribe to self-doubt, but knowing that I don't know a lot and being open to everyone's feedback and filtering it through what feels good to me, like with being able to talk to team members about feelings and emotions, that's been super useful. And I'm still learning, so I'm clumsy, but the two that I have on my nightstand right now are Brene Brown's Dare to Lead. And her TED Talk on vulnerability 12 or so years ago. I watched it at a time that was a really rough time for me in work. I had just gotten laid off and was 8.5 months pregnant. It was a nightmare. And that one TED Talk, I think, softened me in a really good way. So watch that. It's 20 minutes. It's absolutely worth it. But her book on Dare to Lead is really just about that emotional intelligence at work. And then the other one is Radical Candor. I'm learning a lot how to have difficult conversations in a really constructive way.
Yeah.
So that is hard. It's easy for me to avoid. I like to go out to people I know and just champion the hell out of them, right?
Yeah.
I am pumped about all of your wins.
Yeah.
But I'm still learning on how to be able to correct things because it's just as important. And yeah.
Yeah.
So
I like that.
those are the two books that I have right now. Otherwise, I just ask people a lot.
Yeah.
What works for them. I'm trying to start one-on-one meetings lately with, do you feel heard? I think because I like people asking me that as well.
Yeah, that's great. I love that you had two books right there, like almost like you're ready to answer the question.
I do.
So great. And Tess on Twitter had a couple great questions as well. One that will sort of segue us into some of the more like SEO like things, ranking factors and tech SEO and stuff like that. But her first one, which you may or may not have answered, but I was going to kind of ask this as well for like, her question is, how do you keep your team motivated and excited? My version of that would be thinking about maybe other people that are either leading a team or like myself, like I'm trying to keep my clients and their writers and developers excited, right? So in a way, I'm sort of leading a team in that very small context. What are some things that you've done or that we can do to lead the team and keep them motivated and excited, especially when it comes to SEO related things?
Ooh. This is a weird one to ask right now, right? Life is really, really weird right now.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I was gonna say I did think about this one a little bit, and I've noticed two things with clients, right? So one is I've noticed that people just don't want to do things when the task isn't small enough and specific enough, and it has nothing to do with motivation, right? But if I drop a 300-word email, on a writer, or 5 things that I want them to do instead of just that one really important thing, that's not a matter of motivation. It's just a matter of them seeing too many tasks in front of them, maybe it not being clear. And so then they don't do anything at all. And so I'm trying to be better about motivating through being very clear at what I'm trying to convey and ask of my clients and what I want them to be doing. So that's one thing that I thought about that. And it's funny because you can think somebody's just not motivated, quote unquote, but maybe it's just a lack of clarity for them or a lack of that, what's the first step of something I need to be doing. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it as well, especially because you are leading an actual team at the company.
I still love hearing you say that. Like, I do get to lead an actual team that's doing good work.
Yeah.
I feel very lucky.
I just talk to my clients for an hour every week and then like, see ya. It's like when I taught piano lessons, I'd like babysit a child for 30 minutes and then like, okay, they're your child now.
Yeah, instead I'm leading teams and having kids. Jesus, what was I thinking? I think there are a few things. So I'll start with the SEO kind of stuff. I kind of wrote this down here, but simplifying everything. I love what you said about that. We need to do that internally too. So part of that is not just making it simple, checking in and saying, does that make sense to you? Like checking in and saying something like, I know you have a busy day. Do you find this valuable? Do you think this is worthwhile? If not, like, let's see what else is there. I like the triple whys, like find something and ask why. Okay, I'm going to do this because why? And then get down to something that actually feels motivating. Because if I ask you to run a report, good Lord, that's boring, right?
Yeah.
But if I ask you to do something to give some background on the people or business problems, it starts to become a little more interesting because we all want to make some sort of an impact, not just churn stuff out. So that triple why should I do this? Why should I care? Etc. That's good.
I like that.
On my team in particular, hopefully what we've done is create this safety to be able to ask. It's like a no dumb question rule. Actually, Jamie on my team, she's good. She's one of the newest team members, but she always does the no dumb question team.
Yeah.
To ask stuff and give them actual space set aside to collaborate. It's not enough to just say, hey, can you ping your teammate? But have actual meetings, pair up on clients, stuff like that, because each person on my team are deep specialists and they all love to learn. So if I can pair them and create safety so that one person is teaching another, like that's good. You start to feel that energy.
Yeah.
And that excitement. I think outside of SEO, it's much harder. I think it's really, I think we have to stop bullshitting ourselves and saying like, great job on a task, show up every day to work at 9 o'clock and do your things. Like, there is a global pandemic. There's crumbling political structures all over the world. Like, life is hard, work is weird. But I think if we acknowledge that and make room for it, like take mental health days, talk to people that make you feel better, volunteer for causes, like take work off to go, protest if you want to. That helps to keep them motivated.
Yeah. Yeah.
To show up. And then I'm going to steal a line from, I'm in a confidence boot camp with Kirsty Holst right now, who is an amazing human being. And last week we talked, and one thing that resonated, she goes, what you celebrate gets repeated. And so maybe that's something to think about in terms of teams being motivated and excited, because if we celebrate them in ways that we see people staying motivated or that energize them, then we'll keep feeding that engine. I like that. I feel like she challenged me in that way to think about it. So I'm going to challenge you too, Dan. But what we celebrate gets repeated. So what do we want repeated? Let's make a lot of noise about it.
I hope you're not challenging me now, because I have to think about that a little bit. What you celebrate.
You can get back to me in
okay.
12 minutes.
I'll report back. I like Tessa's second question, and this will segue nicely into tech SEO, maybe some ranking factor stuff. So as people are joining, you're in the chat, leave your SEO questions in there. We want to talk to SEOs, but even if there's anybody lurking that's a site owner, business owner, marketer, there's no question that we're not going to tackle. I hope I don't say that with regret later. But Tessa's second question is, what resources do you recommend for somebody who really needs to brush up on his or her tech SEO skills? And I think this is a good one. If you'd like, I can jump in first.
Yeah, you jump in first.
About that one. It's not a resource, but I'd like to just get into a website and audit it. If we're talking about brushing up, right? So I think that for somebody that has some background in tech SEO, maybe you know how to crawl a site, maybe you understand how to look through Search Console for issues, you probably understand accessibility, indexing, etc. I like just sort of getting in there hands-on and auditing a site. I know that's not a resource, but that is how I like to learn everything, right? Is just getting in there and doing it. So that was kind of the initial thought that came to mind for me. I know I'm like kind of getting out of the question by not actually spelling out a resource, but do any come to mind for you?
Yeah. I'm jotting down a few, but Elena just put out in her SEO FOMO newsletter, which has become like one of my favorites that she puts out, or that anyone puts out. But she just put out this massive resource that I thought was absolutely delightful, and not just for folks that are new, but there's stuff in here that I was clicking through and I'm like, oh hell yeah, I need a refresher on this. Like, this is good. Like, this is going to help me here and there. It's called I think it's learningseo.io.
Yep.
Such a link to that, but it is a delight. She's collected good resources there, and I trust pretty much whatever she says.
Yeah.
The other things that I can think about are really get into forums. Google has a good forum where you can go in and ask questions and help. You don't have to participate, just go snoop. Yeah. Use the search and see how other people are thinking about it, or get the Googlers' answers because they're in there. And on that too, I mean, Google actually does have a lot of documentation. They're not always rah-rahing about it, and a lot of it is under developers.google.com.
Yep.
But a lot of it has very good implications for technical SEO. So go snoop around in there, because good Lord, there's some really valuable documentation. Ask other people how they do stuff when they do it. Just ask.
Yeah, Twitter.
I think most people that do good work, they're happy to answer that question. Like, they get excited about it.
This is how non-self-promotional I am. Like, I'm so bad at it. Like, you could listen to my podcast. That might be, in fact, the Becky, who you recommended for podcasts, gave a great interview the other week about all kinds of awesome tech SEO stuff. So, if you're somebody that listens through osmosis and sort of audio format, I think podcast is a great way as well.
Yeah, and people are into sharing now, right? It's not 10 years ago when it was all cards to our chests. Like, there's not a ton of secrets. It's just good strategies and motivation and curiosity. I'll steal something from developers too, is to just sit along and watch someone else do the work. A lot of programmers will watch someone else code, peer review. That's fantastic. Ask someone if you can not distract them.
Yeah.
Buy them cookies and just quietly watch them do something. And I think you'll learn a lot from that. I mean, everyone on my team works with DeepCrawl as a tool.
Yeah.
We all use it differently. Anytime someone shares the screen, I'm like, oh man, I would never thought of going through that workflow to get that data. So
Yeah.
just watching people work is pretty awesome too.
And who are there SEOs that are doing like live streaming auditing a website? I know I like a little bit when COVID first started, I saw a few people like, hey, I'm going to stream myself doing keyword research for an hour. And I always thought it'd be a cool thing to do, like just watch over my shoulder type of thing. I wonder if there's like a demand for that out there. Maybe people that are just learning SEO, or, if somebody here is watching, you take that idea and use it, because maybe people might want that.
I'm in charge everyone for it because it's a good idea. I don't know. I'm not as cute into the tech, like the community as I want. I go through like socially, I go through periods of total social blackout where I just can't talk to other humans. So I miss out on a lot. But I know that Martin Split does some debugging on Twitch. That is pretty fun. And one of the folks that we partner with a lot at DeepCrawl, Dave Smart, who's just stupid brilliant. Follow him. He's also a good human, but he participates in that and learns things and brings findings back. So watching other tech SEOs, so someone who's mindful of the tech and the SEO debug something live, is pretty cool. Yeah.
So I'm going to humor every question in the chat. Septimus the Destroyer says, can chickens swim? I actually don't know, but if you know, feel free to chime in and answer.
They can't fly, so you'd hope they'd have some way of like defending. They can't climb trees.
God,
they're pathetic.
Yeah. I really don't know. Anyways, moving along. So we have a...
I'm going to go for yes. I'm going to go for yes, by the way.
Be an optimistic yes. We do have a couple more questions in the chat from 3 Aspens Media Client Analytics. They say, would like to learn more about how you do reporting weekly, monthly, quarterly for clients. I struggle between extremes of data dumping and providing too brief of reports. Trying to find a balance that incorporates nice visuals and storytelling with actionable info that doesn't take forever. And I think this might be Jennifer Kern on Twitter, who just messaged me there the same question as well, unless somebody's reading your mind. So Ashley, thoughts on that?
That's tricky, right?
Yeah.
Holy shit. That's a tough question. I think it's probably going to depend on each client. I like doing some live dashboards. My team, Rachel Anderson, does a lot with blending data, which is super useful in GDS, which is accessible, pretty to look at, so they can roll it up to other teammates. But in general, I'm trying to think about the way that we structure a lot of our relationships with clients, monthly, fortnightly, something like that. And about, a solid third of each meeting is looking at data. And then 2/3 of the meeting is kind of what's next, what projects are you working on, what problems do we find. So I don't know. I like to be able to dump the data on a semi-regular basis, but then it's up to us to pull out a couple of points.
Yeah.
They're going to be like, if you're presenting to a room of 20, there are going to be 2 people that care about that data. 2 people will go and look at the data that you link to. The rest of them are just going to care about the 2 or 3 points that you pull out of it.
Yeah.
So how much data do you need? Do you like to go back and look at it? Because I think it's more about what data do you need and able to pull out a couple of key points.
Yeah, I mean, for Jennifer, I'll answer with 2 concrete examples. So I work with a well-known meat delivery company. People might know about it. It's not hard to find out who it is. But for reporting for them, I work directly with somebody that builds his own reports internally. So I have the luxury of being able to get on Zoom calls with my contact at this company and basically walk through stuff on screen, take a look at his slide deck, but he internally will put together, the slides, the visuals, he'll take screenshots. So, Jennifer, for anybody else out there, like depending upon how deep you are into the consulting and what you're doing, oftentimes I've leaned on other clients like to build a dashboard, right? So with another company a couple of years ago, it was a company selling like teaching products. I worked for like a month or so with their internal analytics person, giving my input on what I thought they should be looking at for metrics and what time range, month over month, year over year, etc. She built the dashboard and she's like incredible at it. She did like a whole data studio dashboard, but I didn't actually have to build it. Once it was built, they were looking at it like habitually internally. So I think some of this question can relate a little bit to like, how deep are you in the need to build out all these reports on your own? And I know that's not answering like how much data, but I think, and Ashley, what you're getting at too, is like a lot of data now is just so it's like live, right? You just have like a live dashboard. So I
Yep.
do think that's a good way to think about it for people that maybe feel like they want to provide a lot of data, but in a way that's accessible and approachable for the client. Is you set up a dashboard. I love the blending thing too. We did that a lot with this Data Studio dashboard,
Yeah.
and have it accessible so somebody can log in and just look at it self-serve when they want to. So I think that's probably a good modern way to balance that conundrum.
Yeah. I mean, it's translation is half our job in SEO. So as long
Yeah,
as the data is lovely, someone's going to be paying attention.
yeah,
Why
and
dashboards are great, but you'll probably have to put that cap on it and tell them why they should care.
right. And Jennifer too. I don't know if this is helpful, but I do most of my delivery over video calls, so I don't put together visuals. I'll have the data ready and the reports ready, and I deliver it to the client on a Zoom call that's recorded. Those recording links go in a document, and anybody can watch them at any time. So, Jennifer, that's another option too. If you're feeling bogged down by just like how much work it takes to gather all these screenshots and stuff, I found that to be very efficient, yet a very effective way to deliver that to clients in a way that they're very satisfied with as well. So, great question. Speaking of analytics and measurement, there's a couple great points and questions that came in from Jeremy Rivera on Twitter. By the way, if you're watching the chat or the video, feel free to ask questions live in the chat. We'll try to get as many of those as possible. And in the meantime, we're going to tackle some questions from Twitter. So, all right, let me try to pick apart Jeremy's question. So he wants to know, what are your best practices when it comes to estimating the potential growth of your SEO campaign? Are they based on number of posts, over impact, percentage of growth by month, or some other time frame? Assuming you already did the legwork to gather keywords and get tough concept of potential traffic in your niche, or at C-suite clients with freelancers or in-house SEOs with corporatized, there's a lot of words in here, CMO, CFO above them, what are reasonable, responsible models of growth to telegraph potential of investment while not overselling the potential change in revenue? So there's a lot to unpack there. I know you did a presentation not too long ago, right, about kind of selling, right, to the C-suite or selling SEO.
I was like, did I?
Yeah.
Yes, I did, sir. I have another one coming up on it. um, Social blackouts. Whenever I get nervous, I just wipe it from my brain. The data one's tough. So you have to follow with some stuff on campaigns and stuff like that and keyword stuff, because just to be clear, I can't do anything when it comes to writing and marketing and that side of it. Like, that takes a special kind of talent I don't have. But the technical side and how to join up, say, C-level and developers and SEOs, I love that. Use accepted data that you can quote, even if you feel like you have an absolutely brilliant model. I've written models with percentages that I felt like were safe and standard deviations. It means nothing if you can't point to another authoritative resource. So I actually think that with marketing, Google's site has some really good data that you can extrapolate from different papers that they've produced and by different markets. That's a good place to start in terms of this could be that, with caveats. It does have to affect money. With the technical SEO in general, what I have found super useful is a little bit less of the campaign and what you gain, and more about removing liabilities and tactics so that you can do fun things. I don't like to think of SEO as any sort of campaign that can be directly tied to ROI or has to be directly tied. I think a lot of it is just owning a business and running a business and being able to stay afloat. That helps get me off the hook a little bit with that. How much am I going to get from this? Which is a scary, hard conversation to have, to be honest.
Yeah.
But also, I would like to get people thinking about it, especially C-level, thinking about SEO as something different. It's not this optional add-on, right? It's literally how we do business. I think of SEO as sometimes a dirty word, because maybe it oversimplifies everything that y'all are doing, that y'all are plugging in to make sure that the site works, that the developers know what's important, that you're catching issues before they go live, that it's working with sales and marketing, that's representing your brand, building community, all of that is part of it. So I hope that answers a bit. I'm slipping out of the actual numbers, but for me, being able to point to, especially Google resources, they won't often listen to me on a call and trust me right away, but if I can point to a source or two, and I do that internally as well when I'm trying to sell an idea, just find some data to back you up. And not to be an absolute shit about this, but there's a lot of data to back up whichever way you want to go. So even if you're not quite on path what everyone else uses, there's data out there that can help you tell the story to get what you need from it.
I like that. I have two thoughts for Jeremy. One is how I estimate traffic growth potential, and two would be, well, let me tackle that first, because what was the second part? It just like literally went out of my brain as you were giving your answer. But first, the way that I estimate the potential growth of the SEO campaign is, let's say I'm planning content, right, for a blog or for a resource section. When I plan content, each topic I assign a traffic potential number 2, right? So let's say it's benefits of green tea is like the topic, right? If my client site is going to write a single article about the benefits of green tea, I find an existing piece of content in Google that's relevant and that ranks highly for that, use SEMrush to give me the traffic estimate of what they're getting monthly. You do that for every single piece of content that you're planning out. And yeah, it's a lot of work, but you know, if you're planning out like 50 blog posts or 100-page resource or something like that, like you can get that data in there to say, okay, for every single page we're posting, here's the potential traffic based upon SEMrush estimates. Then you just add it all together and you go, okay, once all of this content is published, here's the sum of those 100 posts. That's our traffic number, estimated, right? Like obviously there'll be a margin of error. And I think that's fairly straightforward to do as long as you keep in mind some of the caveats and the, you know, the downsides of using SEMrush or Ahrefs numbers, right? They're not always exactly accurate. They're directionally accurate and they're relatively accurate, but you have to go in and make sure that if you put a single post in there, you're filtering only by where they rank in the top 10 positions, not everywhere, right? Because SEMrush will tell you, oh, they rank position 12, 90,000 searches a month. They're getting 2,000 clicks. Like that's totally not happening, right? So you need to make sure that you're looking at the data accurately. But number 2 on that, and I literally just had it in my brain as I was giving that answer and then it went away again. Number 2, what do we estimate the traffic growth over a month? Did the legwork to get.
You got this.
Yeah, no, I know. I really just had it in my brain. So estimate the potential growth of your SEO campaign, number of posts, C-suite, corporatized CFO. It literally went out of my brain again. But that's how I estimate traffic growth potential, right? Is using those actual numbers. And you can do that on product pages, e-commerce category pages, as long as there's an existing page in Google that's telling you about how much traffic it's getting, you can then estimate yours. And I have my second one. So I always go by past growth examples. So I know on past e-commerce sites I've worked with, if I work with them for a year or 2 years, I know their product and category pages are typically going to grow anywhere from 10% to double, right? I know for content marketing, the way I estimate it again is by using these SEMrush estimates, right? I know for like, let's take a software company and you look at the ceiling of how much possible search volume there is for all of their core software keywords. Yeah. And you kind of go, okay, we're starting here. Typical growth when I've done this in the past has been anywhere from 20% to 80%. I'm just kind of making that up, right? But once you gain experience, that's where I often refer back to past projects. And I can say, well, it's really hard to predict any website's growth. But in these past scenarios, there is a low, medium, and high range of growth that has happened. And I think that, number one, not only gives them maybe a number, but also reinforces your past expertise that you've like seen and done this before. So, you know, if you are somebody that's consulting or working with a lot of different companies, that's something that you can draw from, right? And maybe you're in-house and you don't have the benefit, but that's where you could reach out to like a consultant like myself and say, hey, I'm working with this company in-house. I'm trying to project some numbers. What have you seen happen in the past? And I think that's like another good way to get at it. And I do feel like there's a second component to his questions, which is tying this to potential business growth or revenue. Mm-hmm. And I was literally just working this out with a potential new client. And I think there's 2 ways to do it. One is if you are working on an e-commerce site and you can get a value per visitor, like that is the holy grail metric. Because if you have a value per visitor, you can go, okay, well, we kind of know our conversion rates. We know if we're going to grow product and category pages, you know, we're going to double that. Well, we're going to double whatever the value per visitor is, assuming the conversion rates stay the same. And then if you can project other soft metrics like, okay, conversion to an email list is 10% on content marketing, and then we convert at 5% when we send out emails, Well, then you can back that into, okay, if we 20x our content marketing traffic, that's what our conversion numbers might look like. And you kind of do that month over month or year over year. And I think those are some really great ways to kind of get at those numbers. Now, if you're working for like a service company and all you can attribute is like a goal completion, so like a form, like somebody filling out a form or something like that, then you have to get with your sales team and help them tell you, okay, for every 100 leads we send you, how does that convert for you? Like, how do you close? Like maybe your business model is you sign 2 enterprise companies a year, right? Like maybe you're like a services company and that's your revenue. Like I worked with a sales recruiting company years ago, and like if they signed 1 client, that paid for my retainer like 10x for the entire year, right? If they like made 1 conversion. So I think in a situation like that, you need to figure out, okay, conversion rate to a lead form. How do those lead forms then convert to, business? And that all gets backed into traffic. And the whole trick is segmenting branded search to transactional intent search to informational intent search, because they're all going to convert different and they're all going to cause a different lifetime value or, total conversion value, depending upon the business and what exactly it is. So it's a lot of number crunching. But I think, Jeremy, to kind of close out this question, the thing I really like to do is point to those past cases, because that gives people confidence. And a lot of this is emotional, like you talked about, Ashley, earlier, working with your team. A lot of this working with like the CMO, CFO is emotional for them, where you not only want to give the numbers, but make them feel like you're secure in your estimates. And I think pointing back to those past numbers also really help with that too.
Oh my God. So you just blew that away. Everyone go back and listen at like 37 minutes onward for an actual answer on the ROI of this. I definitely tend to be a little softer, just trying to get top level investment in just the tech. But when you're being mindful of what's going on, especially what's driving traffic to the site versus, for me, just like, is the site working for the love of all that is holy?
Right.
There's some really cool things you can bring in there. So
yeah. And SEO is fascinating because it's not just linear or one for one. Like the more you do SEO, it drives so much brand awareness that it makes other things easier, and you have the leverage to run PPC better or vice versa. And like, it's very fascinating stuff when you realize how non-linear it all works, and how they sort of like, when you run PPC, you get more organic traffic as more people click on the organic result. And there's a lot of, and like retargeting. So I have a client that is retargeting top of funnel traffic with like Facebook retargeting and stuff like that. And they made 5 figures of revenue in 1 month off of retargeting their top funnel organic traffic with ads to the right demographics and then converting there too. So like, yeah, I mean, there's some really direct concrete numbers, but all these other softer numbers too, I think can really help sell things as well.
I think there's this really good balance between folks who I think are pushing a little too hard on ROI and saying that it's, SEO is the panacea and is worth this much, versus what I usually do, which is say ROI and like collapse into a fainting chair. So Dan, you're finding a very good balance. I dig it. I like it.
Should we try to tackle Victor's question?
God damn it, Victor, you're too smart for us.
So we're going to tackle Victor's question. We've got a good 15 minutes or so left. So if there are people watching in the chat, and there's a good number of people here now. Hello, everyone watching. If you don't have a question, drop a comment and let us know where in the world you are. I really always love to find out where people are watching from. And while you do that, we're going to tackle Victor's question. So Victor Pan says, can Google identify soft 503 pages in a single page app that only serves 200 status codes? He has a single page app that's getting millions of hits from Googlebot, and it's not built to handle that kind of traffic. So we were trying to pick apart this question a little bit before the live stream began. And what are your, so basically let's try to distill the question first of all. So he's saying Googlebot's hitting the single page app tons and tons of times, because maybe is he saying Googlebot's considering it to be multiple pages, or there's multiple resources they have to hit? Like why would, that's the first thing I want to pick apart here is what's the mechanism that Google would be using to, and why would Googlebot be hitting it millions and millions of times? And I want to caveat this entire segment here by saying, Victor, maybe you should just ask John Mueller or somebody about this at Google. because we're going to make our best guess here at an answer, but it might be us sort of doing a live real-time diagnostic as well.
I think he might also just love throwing us curveballs.
I think so.
Which is cool. Like, challenge accepted.
Yeah.
I think these are good, fair questions. I was curious about it because to me it's, soft 503 pages has that connotation of soft 404. So is the user not getting a 503? So never in your server logs are you actually seeing anyone outside of Google having the server say, hey, not really prepared to handle this request, so ease up. Because that's interesting, right? So we want to make sure that we're not serving conditionally on purpose, but maybe it's conditional only because something's throttling on your side. So it's saying, Google, ease up. This is absolutely nuts. I'm going to time you out a little bit because I don't like it, which seems fair if they're hitting your site millions of times. So yeah. I was playing around with the language of, the conditional 503s and soft and what that looks like. What it all comes down to is, I think you've got some sort of a loop or a trap because Google should not be hitting any of those single page app resources that much.
Yeah.
And the way single page apps are built, they're different. Like there's going to be a whole thread of requests that you get to build one page, which is why I think single page apps kind of screw you over with Core Web Vitals, which is another no fun conversation. But
yeah,
I think what I would look to first is where are they? What resources are they hitting? Where are they coming back? What are the timestamps on the different resources? So I could see if there's some kind of loop that I'm hitting. So if you have log files on that, that'd be a wicked fun problem to solve, but I don't know how to solve it. It's a good one.
And I know Victor's smart enough to know this, but for anybody else tuning in as well, I always look for spoofed Googlebot IP addresses. Mm-hmm. Screaming Frog log file analyzer will parse these out for you. And maybe, I'm sure Victor's looked at this, but maybe there's spoofed Googlebots that are crawling as well. And certainly blocking those would help a little bit. But I do sort of think something like what you're saying is probably the case where everything I know about Google and their crawl mechanisms, they try really hard to be good citizens of the web, right? I think that's like Google's exact quote is what they say, right? They try to be good web citizens where they don't hit your server more than they think that it can handle. So it does sound like maybe there's some configuration issue going on behind the scenes there. So yeah, Victor, good one. We've got a bunch of other questions from Twitter. So people are chiming in, saying where they're from. So hi, Michael from Belarus, James from DC, and Jennifer is close to Nederland, Colorado. That might be near you, Ashley.
Heyo, yeah. I love it.
So we have some more questions from Twitter. Again, if you're watching live on YouTube, feel free to ask in the chat. It offers the chance for follow-up or, any clarifications. I do want to get to one. I am totally going to butcher this person's name, but Chandramaluli on Twitter earlier asked a really great question. I actually was kind of interested to see what your answer was and then my answer and kind of compare notes a little. His question was, what are 5 SEO KPIs that every marketer should track daily, weekly, and monthly or regularly? So let's not worry about the time range, just actually 5 SEO KPIs that marketers should track. If you want me to jump in first, I'm happy to do that. But I'm curious to see how our notes compare.
Yeah. The first one that I can think of truly just has to do with the health of the site. Like I think that marketers should be aware when looking at the site how many of the pages are live and responding. It's like it depends on how you're getting that data, but as far as SEO KPIs, we use that one a lot. Do you have a site that's live and most pages are live? They're linked to live pages. Like, what does that score look like? What does that pie chart look like? And I know that feels a little dry and not fun to marketers, but I think if your business is making money online, you have to have some sort of idea of that health indicator of if things are up and running. That's probably going to be the most boring one, I can tell you. Yep. Looks like Dan has something more fun.
You want me to jump in? I'll just list my 5 right out. So I'm going to go, I did see the question earlier, but I'm going to go off the top of my head and a little spontaneous here. So my top one's always going to be branded and non-branded clicks and impressions from Search Console. Just top line, like really, really important. I think a lot of marketers they just look at search traffic, right? And they don't segment. And a lot of people I even see don't segment for like core update issues. I see a lot of like top line, just here's my search traffic. But if you're not segmenting, you're really missing out a lot. So branded search visits, non-branded search visits would be the first two metrics. Then it'd be your some sort of conversion metric from search, right? So maybe the DCOM conversion rate or conversion or goal completion rate, right? So I think having some sort of on-page metric that ties it to a business result is really good for a marketer. It helps them make good content decisions, good marketing decisions. To back it up to the technical stuff, I like your just looking at like, is the site working? To go one level deeper in that, what I really like is a metric like pages that are the gap between pages being crawled but aren't being trafficked, or the gap between pages that are being crawled or indexed but not receiving traffic. I think marketers like that one a lot. Is like, here's how much content Google has. Like, and I'm not talking about like sub pages or like, you know, like not actual content pages, but let's take all your blog posts, right? You've got 1,000 blog posts. Well, people are only visiting 579 of those a month. You've got a whole chunk of blog posts that are not doing anything for you. And that can be covered in your content auditing. But one thing I used to do a lot more of in the past, and maybe I should do again, is in a spreadsheet have like a single line that would show that number, right? So pages indexed, pages being trafficked monthly, what's the difference there, and watch that trend. I think is a really, really good number for marketers to be aware of, because it just shows you how much of your content is or is not working for you. So I think I probably owe the person one more KPI. I'm also a big fan, you know, I know rankings can also be a dirty word. I love rankings if they're used in the right way, meaning we identified this keyword, benefits of green tea. We're going to write a piece of content around that. That ranking is a proxy for how good our content is. That's Google's feedback loop. It's not a marketing goal. It's not a business goal, but it's showing us on a daily basis how good Google thinks our page is for that topic. And so I think if you track rankings in the appropriate way and apply it in the right way, it could be a good metric. And the thing I discovered for rankings is you don't track those month over month or year over year or anything like that, because it's not a cumulative number like traffic. What you do, and what I recommend, is you track rankings compared to the day you first added it. And that's always the way you should track rankings. So if January 1st I had benefits of green tea and I ranked 90, I'm always going to compare whatever the current ranking is to that first starting point number. Because a ranking is not like 100 visits. It's not a cumulative metric. You know, it's a single like spot where you rank, right? And the only way to look at that in terms of progress, in my opinion, is compared to where you first ever started with it. And of course, you can look at it for diagnostics, like core update hits, what keywords did we lose ranking? Like that's good too. But I think as far as a goal, it's always against when it was first added, in my opinion.
I had never thought about that type of metric like that, because I'm one of those people where ranking is a bit of a dirty word, right? Yeah. This is why I like doing these with Dan. Is Dan and I are definitely two separate brains within the same career field, friends, but obviously like we think about a lot of this differently. And I'm always like, well, it's fluid. Like, what truly is your ranking? It's all personalized and it's so volatile. But if I am looking at some averages, you know, without any significant outliers over a long course of time, always going back to the first versus if someone checking on it weekly, I feel a lot more comfortable with that assessment. Like that becomes a little more exciting and accessible to me. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like that. We've got 5 minutes. So should we try to do a quick round through some of Lyndon's questions?
I have one more that I want to tackle before Lyndon.
Oh yeah, I might have missed a few if they came in on your thread.
This is a good one. So Isaac said, would love to hear how you've gone building your personal brand. So any tips for people who haven't focused a lot on that? And I don't have a lot. In fact, I think when I open my mouth, I'm a liability to my personal brand. So Dan, I'm making you take this question because you have done this really elegantly over the years.
Yeah, number one rule is just be helpful. That's always from the beginning been sort of my philosophy, right? Is whenever I tweet or do a podcast or do these YouTube Q&As, like I'm always thinking about what would be helpful for other people. Of course, I'm thinking about what's going to get me more followers or listeners, but the two need to align, right? So it can't just be like what's in it for me and everyone else loses out. I think the other thing that I've been really adamant about is, and I think a lot of people look at me and they think I'm mostly a podcaster or mostly just some guy that tweets about SEO, but 99% of what I do is I'm an SEO consultant, so I'm a practitioner. And my following could probably be 5 times as big if I didn't try to stay true to being a practitioner first and shared some of the, like you see some other people on Twitter sharing these like really diluted or like sort of gimmicky things that will get a lot of retweets or get a lot of shares or get a lot of likes or whatever, but they're not staying true to the actual practice of being an SEO. Like you see people tweet and you could tell sometimes like that person spent a good solid hour on that tweet. Like it's all perfect with the right emojis and bullet points. And most of the time I'm just like in a client meeting and I have a tab open. I'm like, that's something I want to tweet about. And then in between that and the next phone call in 30 seconds, I'm just like sharing. But the spirit of that is trying to help somebody that might be following along. So it's always been about trying to be helpful. I mean, I could give an entire hour YouTube Q&A probably on growing personal brand stuff, because I do think there is a certain skill to it. And as much as I push back against not wanting to be like that influencer type of person, I do think there are tangible things that if anybody wants to gain more of an audience and have a little bit more of an influence or the ability to share things with people, there are things that you can do, but it's kind of hard to get into super concretely in like 2 minutes. I do think having a thing that people know you for is very important, like my podcast, right? And there's other SEOs out there, like I can name like Izzy, like Featured Snippets, Alita, international SEO, for better or for worse, Brian Dean, like, some people love him, some people hate him, but Backlinko, skyscraper technique, like it's branding, right? It's like I have my podcast, and I'd say, even though you're being humble about it, within your own ecosystem, you have certain things people, come to expect and know from you in terms of information or style of delivery, which you say is a liability, but I do think there's a certain entertainment to that, a certain value that people receive from that, and a certain level of being human. And I think that's the other important thing about growing a personal brand as well, is I try to be very real and authentic to who I am when I'm sharing things. And I think you do a fantastic job of that as well, as do others. And I often find that people, when they are just sounding and looking like everybody else, in terms of what they're sharing, then they're not going to get noticed. So those are just some quick thoughts. Did you have any thoughts as well? Or you want to try to like quick round through Lyndon's 100 questions or so?
So I have no thoughts on branding, but Lyndon, I'm going to say, let's keep trolling us on Twitter. Like, let's keep talking about it there. Cause I think there's one other thing I would like to say, slightly unrelated, but February is Black History Month. Which is really important. There are, it's really ridiculous that we only have 1 month that's Black History Month, but there are some really incredible people in the SEO space, some public, some not so public. There are folks out there working to gather up lists of more inclusive resources, people in our field that are doing amazing things. I can be really clumsy with my words, so I'm trying to not stuff in it, but the important part is, let's look outside of our current lens. Let's evaluate who we're following right now, and if they follow a certain pattern, and get out there and try to diversify who we're listening to, where we're getting our ideas from, and who we are reaching back and pulling up with us. So I always like to end on a feel good thing. I think maybe my personal branding is that I have big capital F feelings, and so this is a good thing, I think, for me to end on, and just something that's been in my mind a lot. And I have been seeing, outside of people that are really well branded personally, I have just seen incredible work done by more people than I thought possible once I actually tried to be mindful about opening up who I was following and who I was chatting with.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think if for anybody listening either live or watching this later, for somebody like myself, a white guy, one thing I found, like some people know that they could do better and they want to have an action item. So I'm going to give you an action item. If you are somebody that is regularly invited to an event to speak, to be a guest on the podcast, showing up in lists, you should look to the speaker list first the list. You should ask to know who else is going to be on it. And basically, if you're not seeing yourself being invited to a diverse list, then what I've done is ask that somebody else be included instead. So either say, okay, yeah, I'm super flattered you invited me to be on this podcast, but there's someone else that I think is amazing that a lot of people haven't heard of. And what I like to tell people is it's going to make your show better. Like, people heard from me enough, you know. I've been a guest on dozens and dozens of podcasts. I have my own podcast. I've spoken at events. People don't need to hear more of me. People need to hear more of other people that haven't been heard as much. So I like to try to refer those that are super awesome and smart, but haven't been put on a platform as much, number one. Or an idea that you had, Ashley, I thought was really, really awesome, was if that event really wants you, you can say, okay, let's do a panel where I bring these one or two other people with me that are also awesome. You still get me, but we're going to make it like a panel thing and bring some other people along. And that's actually, I've done that twice actually this year already. So I made a conscious effort to start doing that this year, and it's already worked out twice and everyone's been really happy. So
yeah, even outside of paneling, just co-presenting, bring someone on stage with you.
Yeah.
We get some of you are goddamn rock stars out there and they need you to sell tickets, or you really can bring in crowds. That's fantastic. Reach around, bring someone else with you.
Yeah. And check out United Search.
What'd you say?
Check out United Search. Yeah.
Yeah, United Search, quick incubator to get more diverse people on stage. Shout out. We just matched and paired and sent out, put into contact all the mentors and mentees for this pilot program. 19 mentees, 20 mentors, and I whooped, I hollered, and I celebrated, and maybe had like a good quick cry on Friday after introducing everyone. So that's a really cool thing. But if you ever have questions, if you ever want to start being a little more diverse, or have questions on where to start, I'd say ping Dan or I privately, or tons of other people. I know I can drag people publicly who say dumb things, but I am there to help. If you want to ever message me privately about people I'd recommend that might be a good fit for your event, I would love to share names.
Awesome. Great. Well, this has been a fun Q&A again, our second one. Thanks everyone for joining us in the live chat, asking questions on Twitter, and we'll see everyone next time. Now I need to figure out how to end this thing.
We'll sit here and do this until we turn it off.
End.